Championship. I think we have a match starting soon. It's a bit confusing with daylight saving time, time zones and everything. But in case we have a match starting, we have pknm taking on May Ruse. Let's have a look at the calendar. Where's the calendar? There it is. It is Friday night, and I think this time is actually wrong. So they should be starting any second now, I think. Let's follow pknm. And indeed, the match has started. pknm fellow Swede. He's rated 2541, quite impressive. Very solid guy, great feel for the game. I don't know much about this May Ruse guy. Apparently I have played him 8 times. Oh well. I'd say pknm is the clear favorite here. He's playing a rather unusual system, a bit passive. But it makes sense to put the light squared bishop outside the pawn chain, and maybe he has caught white with an opening trap here. Because if white takes on c4, the knight on e4 is hanging. That looked a bit cheap, but cheap counts as well. And white is actually having some huge problems here. Let's say the queen takes, black can place his bishop on g6. Perfect defense here. And I'd say black has everything going for him. Very nice dual purpose move, bishop g6. And black just continues his development. Is pawn at f5 a move here? What happens then? I suppose black takes, maybe queen e7 check then, and then a pawn on e4. So this seems very natural, opening the e-file, putting the queen in front of the king, securing the e4 square. And do we have anyone watching? Not yet, seems. Pawn e4 seems very natural. Doesn't matter that the pieces here are hanging, because the e-file is opened and black will regain the material with interest. So white's position is very shaky at the moment. If white takes on g6, the question is, do you take the queen or do you just simply take back? Why not bishop takes e4? Yeah. You could just go back with the bishop with a pin on the e-file. Queen is hanging, the pawn on f5 is hanging, white's position is just collapsing here. Just collapsing. So simply taking on g6 is fine. Could go Go for queen e4, take there, and with threats everywhere. But this seems very natural. Let's save this queen for a mating attack. Black is in complete control here. Super safe king, great activity, and an extra queen for just a pawn. One idea here for black would be to take on d4 just to pry the e-file open. And another idea is to play queen e4 check. Maybe pick up the c4 pawn, c2 pawn. Yeah, look at this queen is just great here, sitting in front of the black king with a pin here on the e-file. Queen e4 seems simple enough. Or maybe take on d4. And black opts for the pseudo-sack on d4. Getting more activity for the pieces. You could even take on h2, I suppose. Knight at f4 is another interesting move with the threat of taking on d4, also threatening g2. But black just takes the pawn on h2, weakening white's back rank and picking up a pawn. So maybe knight f4 now. Or you could just keep on picking up pawns. Yeah, why not? And now maybe even take on d4, because if the pawn takes, you have knight f3 and then king d1, pawn e2, and take on d4 with a knight. Black is low on time here. He has to be a bit careful, but I don't expect black to do anything stupid here. He has a lot of threats going for him, and white only has a queen to interpose with when rook h1 will happen, and white will lose everything. Rook h1. No, okay, why not? This was a strange end to the game. Well, a very convincing win for pknm here. And as you can see, they played 2 times before, and pknm won both games. It seems I've beaten both players. 8-0 and 2-0. Okay, so I'll pretend to I'll pretend I'm better than these guys tonight. So what's happening here? White played an early. White won a piece on g4. What's this? Pre-move? You cannot give away pieces like this. This is over already. So this is just silly. Let's play the next game instead. For instance, knight h5 here. Well, white just playing some sensible moves. You could put the queen in front of the king again, maybe. The thing in Crazy House is that if you win a piece, you don't only win one piece, but you get one in hand as well. So white is actually 2 pieces up. Maybe pawn at h6, making use of this pin, but white opts for pawn g6, making use of this pin instead. So black doesn't have any great threats here. The knight gets out of the way. And now if the bishop takes, you can take with this knight. So maybe this was a bit unnecessary for white. What if you take on g4 here? Can you exchange queens? I suppose you can. The king will just run back. And white is calculating, taking on g4, making sure the king is safe. It looks risky to have the king on the 4th rank, but I don't see how black can prevent the king from running back. No. And neither can pknm. Bishop f2, yeah, that wins the queen. You were absolutely right. Because king h3, queen takes here, and king takes, and you have queen g3, which looks like trouble, which looks like mate after king h5 and taking on. So you should definitely go for bishop at f2. But I suppose white could just take on f2. I don't think black can do much with the 2 queens. So just walk back slowly with the king. Nothing to see here. King g3, king f2. Welcome, by the way. Do we have any more watching? Welcome, everybody. And as soon as the black checks stop, white has queen at f7. So this is actually a tricky move. You close the exit, you keep the checks going, but white can take queen g4, king f2, and you can pick up the knight with check, but then you just keep running, don't you? Although h5 is hanging as well, so you might as well put a knight on g3 maybe, or a bishop. Yeah. You don't want to give up the h5 knight with check. So probably take on e5, defending f7, and maybe threatening to take on h5. Going passive here doesn't look right. Queen f7 should end the game almost instantly. Trading queens. And then knight g5 and white crashes through. Yeah. So let's have a quick look there. It looked a bit risky. Obviously, this is where black loses the game. He just blunders a piece. So a bit of exchanges here. G6 looked a bit unnecessary, yeah. So this is actually good for black. Look, the computer has found something. What did we not see? It's made in 7. Pawn f5. Pawn f5. King here. Queen. Oh, well, it's so simple. Why didn't I see this? Bishop. Why did I not see this? If the king goes to f1, you have king d1, and well, you have queen d1 here as well. Yeah, it's mate. Ooh, he missed his chance there. And we see black repeating the same very successful opening as he played in the last game. Black has spent some time here though. His position is a bit cramped. And look out for the d4 pawn pushing forward. Maybe now's the time to play d5 for white. He gives a piece for 2 pawns instead, and some serious threats. Super sharp position here. What do you do as black? It's looking very critical. c7 is hanging. Black might think about bishop at d6, defending c7. He chose the rook instead. And this is a clever move. And the king needs to start jogging. White quickly trades some pieces to get zombies for his army. And threatens knight f5 check, followed by queen e7, I suppose. And also threatens to take on g7. It looks like it's over here, actually. Let's see if black can find some hidden defensive resources here. I mean, you would like to get this rook somewhere here and run with the king, but I can't quite make it work. So black goes for rook e8. And you probably need to start moving the king. What about bishop at f6? Denying the escape route. Should be winning. Bishop at f6. Or checking from a distance. Maybe it's better. Forcing black to put something here on f6. So yeah, that was clever. White didn't want to give a piece to stop the king from fleeing. But now, on the other hand, he can go this direction. And don't forget that black has some threats here. Actually has an immediate mating threat. Rook h1 and take on g2 and knight h3 mate. So you need to be a bit careful here as white. Black just wants to get safe with the king. So he can deliver his sneaky, sneaky mate. So that covers g2. And maybe one way to do this would be to pick up c6 and then just mate. Yeah, I think this looks super promising. Take d7 with check. And now white has everything under control. You can start pawn d7, pick up a rook with check, and whenever you like you can take on f3. It's just winning. Looked like Meirus got a very nice opening there. Black's pieces aren't that harmoniously developed. Yeah, as I mentioned here, d5 is interesting, but maybe this piece, this quick attack is even more dangerous. Yeah, looks completely crushing. Okay, let's get back to the game where pknm is up 2-1. And what happened in the opening? The bishop at c7 looks a bit ridiculous if you ask me. But on the other hand, it supports the e5 pawn thrust. White got away with his pieces, and positionally I like white here. Because this fellow is not so happy behind the black pawns here. On the other hand, I don't know how happy these bishops are either. So question is, do you go for c4, maybe a quick opening of the center, trade queens while the black king is still, yeah, c4 looks good. And black is experiencing some problems at the moment, I'd say. Critical position here. What's the best move for white? You take on d4. Yeah, well, black was threatening the e3 pawn, so maybe it was the safest option. Offering trades. If the pawn takes here, maybe you can take on c7, then knight d5. Actually, I wonder if you can take on d4 with the queen and then start chasing the black queen. Let's say queen d4, and knight f5. It looked interesting to me as well, anyway. But this is perhaps safer. Setting up some tricks here. If you can take there and maybe take on d4, and you have a pin here on the e5 pawn. Isn't d4 hanging now? It should be. So white won a piece here, and the black king is still in the center. Not looking good for black here. And if you castle, white will be all over him with pawn at f6 maybe. And obviously white is threatening mate on e7 with his queen. What's the knockout blow here? Pawn f6 looks tempting, and pknm agrees. And maybe knight f5, threatening the queen, keeping an eye on f6. Should be enough. So offering a queen trade, but also threatening the knight on e4. Moves like knight h5 come to mind. White has everything here. He can start mass trading pieces when he likes to. And the bishop on h4 is covering f2, so king h1 is safe. Just knight f5. And white can start hacking away at the black pieces. So maybe take on d4. And black just loses everything. 3-1 pknm, very convincing win there. Let's see if pknm switches opening. Yes, indeed. And e5 is obviously much sharper. d4 I think is a bit unusual, bringing the queen out so early in the game. Could be a bad idea sometimes, because it's often pushed around. I see no reason why black couldn't play d5 here. Should be equalizing immediately. Just take with the queen. Very sound for black. And white hopes that black will be the one who trades, so he can bring out his bishop with tempo. Maybe we'll see queen e7. Putting the queen on the board, yeah. Covering f7 and also putting some pressure here on the e5. So now maybe black can start getting a bit aggressive with pawn g4. Let's say, okay, or pawn h3. At the moment, black has more forces on the board. He's controlling more squares, so it's very natural to get aggressive here. And if the rook takes, maybe black will play pawn g4, knight g5, knight e5, eyeing the weak f3 square, also threatening the bishop. So getting out of the pin looks wise. Maybe knight b4 threatening c2 is an idea here for black. A lot of tempting moves for black here. Pawn g4 is certainly one of them. And I mean, where is this knight going? If he goes to g5, maybe just trap it with h6. h6 looks so natural to me. You get the knight you want for f3. So which piece do you capture with? Or do you capture it all? You could just take g5 also. Taking g5 looks natural, and then recapture with the queen. The f3 square is weak. The queen on the d file is covering d1. The h2 pawn might be hanging after knight f3, or you could even take on h2 and then fork on f3. And in case of knight e5 here, you have knight f3. So I would probably go for the rook trade here. I want that rook. Where do you hide your king? Black looking for a quick mate here. Yeah, maybe the attack is simply too strong after pawn e2. White gives up more material, but now black can just take on g2, has an extra rook as well. This is over again. Again and again and again. Black just playing natural moves, putting his rooks and semi-open files, the queen around his king. A lot of strong generic moves by black in this game. You could just start piling up rooks here on the white's first rank. This puts an extra pawn on the board. Great coverage for the black king. White doesn't have anything here. Bishop b5 should do it. Or bishop b5 now. Yeah. And with that queen in hand as well. It's so hopeless. So hopeless for white, who resigns. And pknm is in the lead 4-1. So slightly different. This queen c8 move, I mean, isn't it just good if white decides to castle kingside? What if white plays something like this? It looks overly provocative though, but maybe it was a mouse slip even. I'm not sure, but white did have some problems there, because if you take with the queen, black can take on f3 and the pawn takes, and you have a knight fork here on g2 picking up the h4 bishop. So maybe white got a bit tricked. But what happened here? Black played e5. The e5 pawn is hanging, but was bishop b4 strong then? I don't quite understand this game, I have to admit. Maybe white missed a chance here. I'm thinking if you take on c6, pawn takes c6, and queen f7, how dangerous is that? King takes knight e5. Oh, you can go to e6 maybe. Maybe it's not so dangerous after all. But that's certainly an idea that black needs to be careful about. So taking on c6 and playing knight at e5 looks natural. Knight e5 covers g4 as well and hits the c6 pawn and threatens pawn at d7. Also there are potential mating threats. Takes forever to take on c6, so I don't really like it, but maybe pawn e7, rook, bishop takes, and if the king takes, you can take with check on c6, and you've wasted the black option of castling. So, can white find a nice idea here? I rather like the pawn e7 idea here. So, what do you say in the audience? What should white play? It's a bit passively placed here on b3, I'd say. The pawn on b5 versus the bishop on b3 is in favor of black, who can use his light pieces 3 against the white 2 light pieces on the king's side. And pknm thinking a lot here. Now he finds the pawn e7 idea, but I'm afraid it's not the best moment to play it in. Of course, black could have taken on e7 as well. This looks a bit more aggressive. And pknm basically just playing with his increment now. His king is on the run and black calmly picked up a free pawn on g2. These knights are hard to deal with. And pknm tries to randomize a little bit, but I think black can just take on b3 maybe. Still taking on b3 looks very good. Oh, and speaking of good, 2 pawns on the 7th rank looks good. 4-2 pknm. And I'm a bit curious here. Somehow white misplayed it here. Knight d2 was not good because of knight takes d2. But it looks like black is okay here. c1 was the safer route. And now g5, super aggressive and looking good. What about this crazy idea? Look at bishop takes a3. Okay. So knight at e5. That looks strong and natural, but was this just baloney? It probably is. Yeah, not strong enough. And white got the upper hand here. I was thinking pawn e7. But then pawn d2 is good for black apparently. I underestimated that. And here black is just winning. Okay. What was the opening here? Black is back to the bishop d7 c6 maneuver. And he has found another way to deal with the position. So I don't quite see the threat here for, well, the knight on f3 is under attack, obviously. Oh, and we're not live. Okay. Ooh, what's this? White needs to be careful here because this bishop is strong in defense and also supporting this pawn on the long diagonal. Black only needs a couple of moves to get really dangerous. So I suppose king c7 and take with the bishop if white swaps queens. So I'm not sure what black was thinking there, but because bishop takes and you can have knight takes c6 and the queen can land in the corner maybe. Your time, pknm. Watch out. Taking on c6 looks very natural to me. And of course you don't go king c7 because of knight takes e6 check. But the queen on a8 is a bit out of play, I'd say. Takes a move to get back into the game. And here black actually has some counter chances. So maybe bishop at c7 here. Hurry up, black. Now you seem safe. You can maybe switch to an attack here. Pawn on f3 or pawn e2, something. You can take on h2 whenever you like. Run with the king. That was most likely the wrong way. That's a very brave king on d5. And putting the pawn on d3 would have been maybe more aggressive. And queen can swing over. And that's just no way back because king g6, you have queen f5 check. So, wow, 4-3 in favor of pknm. Let's just have a look at the finish of the game there. I thought black was getting back into the game. Yeah, bishop at c7. Semi-aggressive and nice defensive move. Hitting h2. Why is only a little better than? And here you should start running with the king, of course. Because this was too dangerous. Way too dangerous. Oh, you can take on c4 here. This is strange. No. When white gets the chance to think about it, taking on c4 is not so good. But certainly it's better than getting mated. Okay, so what's happening here? Why is he switching openings? And this, I don't like this. Spending 2 moves to get the queenside knight to a fairly useless b6 square. That can't be right. e4 looks natural. Okay, e3, but e4. Why not e4? And this is not a good pawn structure, I'd say. That's a nice little fork. Why not pick up the extra pawn? The question is, should you really take the rook in the corner? I'm not sure, but white has an all-court press here, running with the a pawn, putting pressure on the queen side. You see, this is why I usually avoid taking in the corner in this kind of position, because the queen can get a bit active on a8. Although white should have everything under control here, I'd say. Maybe g5 is an idea for black. Maximum pressure on the king side. So white probably wants to take on e7 and then pawn f6 or something. Maybe take e7 and bishop e2. Well, you can wait with taking on e7. And the only purpose I see here is the threat against the c2 pawn, and that's not a great threat. White picked up c4 for free. And maybe you take on d5, yeah. E takes, loses the connection between these two guys, so I wouldn't recommend this. Simply go back to c7, and now the king side actually looks quite safe. This queen lost contact with the king side. And now it looks like white is the aggressor. You want to take e7 and play pawn at f6. Now the attacking idea is knight g4 maybe, although h5 could be a problem. White does have some extra material, 3 extra pawns, so why not put them to use and then start playing some chess. Some fine moves by white there, securing the king side, and now there's the dual threat of bishop takes a8 or bishop takes e8. If the black queen moves, you can take e8, and maybe you can take e7 as well and just start pushing forward. Because the white king seems very safe at the moment. Well, you take e8 now, don't you? Okay, I would have done it the other way around. So shielding the queen from the protection of the d5 pawn. And if white gets to pick up d5 as well, well, this is looking quite bleak for black. Also, taking on d7 looks very tempting. But maybe pknm will mess up in his in the time scramble. Nice follow-up. White is probably hoping to take f7. Or you could take a7 now, threatening a knight fork here. So, what do you do? Maybe knight h8, pick up g6. So white finally crashing through. d5 is hanging for free. And pknm wins again. He's in the lead 5-3 and only needs 1/2 point out of the 2 last games. And then he'll be through to the 4th round. Maybe black should have played d5 in the move before, but just to avoid knight f5 ideas, I was thinking here, push the d pawn maybe. Because this costs black some material. And I don't think black has quite enough for the piece that he sacrificed. He'll need to direct all his pieces towards the king side to try to conjure up an attack. But what about bishop takes, pawn takes, bishop d7, and if the king goes here, you can pick up c6 and knight threats on d7. Looks like a decent attack for white here. Oh, you need to take on e4. Otherwise, you're just dead. So I was thinking bishop d7 here. What's wrong with bishop d7? Because if you take on c6 now, there's a knight fork on d7. So black needs to take with his queen when you have moves like knight e5. I'm not sure why white didn't play that. you're still thinking. Meyrus. Starting to sacrifice a little bit. Well, there is a knight check on e6 that black needs to be aware of. Yeah, queen d5 looks strong. c5 is hanging, but also where does the black king go? Because if you go to e8, the rook on g8 is hanging. If you go to f8, the bishop on c5 is hanging. But that's probably the least evil. pknm. I'm falling asleep here. You need to start moving. And you probably need to let go of that c5 bishop. I know it's your pride and joy, but king f8, queen takes c5, and then bishop at d6, and hope for something around the white king. No, black might consider taking on e6. Yeah, and then maybe pawn e2. Because it does seem like black is defending all the important squares. So bishop f3 with the ideas like knight e2, king h1, take on g2, and then another knight, bishop on f3, looking to mate. pknm down to just increment. Meyrus, you don't find anything here. You are panicking. Just the last few seconds now. And now there's the forced mate. Knight e2 and rook g1. So pknm takes this finally, but white was doing quite okay here. Check. That was not the best move. As you can see, black can take on e6. with his queen. And here black is just winning. Oh well, I'm super duper tired. I'm gonna play some chess here in 10-11 hours. So I'll call it quits for tonight. Congratulations to pknm, who's through to the 4th round of the knockout, on the preliminary knockout rounds. I hope to see you again soon. Tomorrow Gingerbread Man is playing Little Plotkin. I don't think I'll be able to cover that match, but maybe on Sunday. We'll see. Thanks for watching and stay tuned. I will try to raid someone. Well, I'm not following anyone.